The Book of Joy, Lasting Happiness in a Changing World, by His Holiness the Dalai Lama and Archbishop Desmond Tutu, with Douglas Abrams. Picture this, a tiny airport nestled in the Himalayan foothills. Two elderly men spot each other across the tarmac. One wears the deep maroon and saffron robes of a Tibetan monk. The other, the purple shirt and white collar of an Anglican archbishop. The moment they lock eyes, their faces light up like excited children on Christmas morning. They rush toward each other, embracing not with the stiff formality you'd expect from world leaders, but with the warm, genuine affection of brothers who've been apart too long. The archbishop playfully touches the monk's cheeks. The monk responds by pursing his lips as if blowing him a kiss. Now, these aren't just any two friends sharing a reunion. They're His Holiness the Dalai Lama and Archbishop Desmond Tutu, two of the most beloved spiritual figures alive today. And this meeting, this extraordinary week-long conversation in Dharamsala, India, was about to become a gift to millions. It all started with a deceptively simple question. In a world absolutely drowning in suffering, how on earth is it possible to live a genuinely joyful life? Here's the thing that makes this question so powerful. These aren't armchair philosophers theorizing about joy from comfortable positions. The Dalai Lama has lived in exile for over 50 years, forced to flee his homeland of Tibet, with violence snapping at his heels. The Archbishop survived and battled the soul-crushing brutality of apartheid in South Africa. Both men have stared into the darkest corners of human cruelty, witnessing oppression, violence, hatred, and devastating loss. And yet, somehow, they're two of the most joyful, playful, laughter-filled humans you could ever meet. How is that even possible? That's the beating heart of the Book of Joy. This book has touched millions of readers worldwide, not because it serves up easy, feel-good platitudes, but because it offers something far more valuable, a genuine roadmap for finding lasting happiness that doesn't depend on what life throws at you, but on what you cultivate within yourself. Over the next little while, we're going to step into that week of conversation with them. We'll uncover what joy really is at its core, explore the sneaky obstacles that block our path to it, and, most importantly, discover the 8 pillars of joy, 4 qualities of mind and 4 qualities of heart that, when practiced together, can fundamentally transform your life from the inside out. This isn't just a summary you'll forget tomorrow. It's an invitation to discover that joy isn't some fleeting emotion that comes and goes with the weather, but a way of being in the world. And by the time we're done, you'll have practical keys to cultivating that joy in your own life, no matter what storms are raging around you. Our journey begins with a story that perfectly captures who these two spiritual giants really are. They were once scheduled to give a joint talk, and just as they were about to walk on stage in front of all the cameras and dignitaries, the Dalai Lama, this global icon of peace and compassion, suddenly grabbed the Archbishop's neck and pretended to choke him. Without missing a beat, the Archbishop turned to him and whispered with mock seriousness, "Hey, the cameras are on us. Act like a holy man." They both burst into uncontrollable laughter. Now, this might seem like just a funny moment between old friends, but it's actually a key that unlocks everything they're trying to teach us. What we think a holy person should be, somber, serious, untouchable, is the complete opposite of what these two embody. They're showing us that true spiritual depth isn't found in grim-faced severity, but in lightness, in genuine humility, and in the ability to laugh at ourselves. The path to joy isn't about denying our humanity or transcending it. It's about embracing it in all its beautiful, messy, utterly ridiculous glory. The first crucial lesson they share is understanding the vital difference between happiness and joy. The Archbishop paints this picture. Imagine a mother in labor. She knows she's about to face immense pain, the kind most of us spend our entire lives trying to avoid. Yet she accepts it willingly. And the moment her child enters the world, after hours of excruciating labor, the joy flooding through her is beyond measure. It's a joy that comes through suffering, not despite it. This, they tell us, is what real joy looks like. Happiness is like a weather vane, constantly spinning based on external circumstances. We're happy when we get the promotion, when we fall in love, when the sun is shining. But what happens when we lose the job, when the relationship crumbles, when the storm clouds roll in? Happiness evaporates, like morning dew. Joy, though, is something entirely different. It's an inner state, a way of being that doesn't get tossed around by life's inevitable ups and downs. As the Archbishop puts it, joy is much bigger than happiness. It's this deep sense of well-being that comes from within, a profound satisfaction and meaning that endures even when life is kicking you while you're down. The Dalai Lama nods in agreement. He mentions that scientists have spent years trying to crack the code of lasting well-being, and guess what they discovered? It doesn't come from money, or power, or fame. He actually knows billionaires, he says, who are deeply, profoundly unhappy. Lasting happiness isn't hiding in any external achievement or possession. It lives only in the human mind and heart. This brings us to what might be the book's most surprising paradox. The path to joy often runs straight through the heart of suffering. When the Archbishop asks the Dalai Lama the question everyone wants answered, "You've been in exile for 56 years. Why aren't you utterly miserable?" The answer is absolutely stunning. The Dalai Lama doesn't brush off his pain or pretend it doesn't exist. Instead, he shares a profound mental technique passed down from an ancient Buddhist master named Shantideva, who taught a beautifully logical approach to tragedy. If something can be done about the situation, what need is there for dejection? And if nothing can be done about it, what use is there for being dejected? It sounds almost too simple, right? But listen to how he applies this in real life. When he thinks only about his own country, about the suffering of his Tibetan people, worry creeps in. But then he deliberately widens his lens. He looks at the whole world and sees countless others suffering. Muslim communities being persecuted in China, people facing war and crushing poverty everywhere. Now here's the subtle genius of this practice. He's not minimizing his own pain by playing the comparison game. He's uniting his pain with the pain of others. He realizes he's not alone in this. This shift from my suffering to our suffering becomes the birthplace of genuine empathy and compassion. And in that deep connection, his own personal anguish actually lessens. This theme echoes throughout the entire book. Pain is inevitable, but suffering is optional. The Buddha taught this using the metaphor of two arrows. When something painful happens, an injury, a loss, a cruel word, that's the first arrow striking you. There's no avoiding it. But then comes the second arrow, your reaction to the pain. It's the spiral of sorrow, the consuming grief, the burning anger, the drowning self-pity. The second arrow is something we shoot at ourselves. The Dalai Lama suggests that by shifting our perspective, we can learn to dodge that second arrow. But he takes it even further, and this is where it gets really interesting. He says that losing his country, as genuinely tragic as it was, also opened new doors. If he'd remained in the Potala Palace in Lhasa, he would have been trapped in what he calls a golden cage. As a refugee, he was free to meet people from every walk of life, scientists, spiritual leaders from other traditions, ordinary folks living ordinary lives. He says, quite remarkably, "Personally, I prefer the last 5 decades of refugee life. It's more useful, more opportunity to learn, to experience life." He's transforming tragedy into opportunity. This isn't about toxic positivity or pretending something terrible is actually wonderful. It's about examining the same event from every possible angle until you find the perspective that empowers rather than imprisons you. As he says, there's a Tibetan saying, "Wherever you have friends, that's your country, and wherever you receive love, that's your home." The Archbishop echoes this wisdom by reflecting on Nelson Mandela's journey. When Mandela entered prison, he was an angry young man, head of the armed resistance. He spent 27 years in a tiny cell, breaking rocks in pointless hard labor. Most would call that a catastrophic waste of a life. But the Archbishop sees it differently. Those 27 years were necessary, he argues. They were the refining fire that burned away the dross, the anger and hatred, transforming him into a man of extraordinary compassion and wisdom. His suffering ennobled him rather than embittering him. The lesson hits hard. Suffering isn't a roadblock to joy. It's often the very path that leads us there. Nothing beautiful in the end comes without a measure of some pain, the Archbishop explains. This is how our universe has been made up. But how do we actually walk this path? How do we face the pain without being swallowed whole by it? The Dalai Lama shares a powerful personal story. He was once traveling to a hospital in absolutely excruciating pain from what turned out to be a gallbladder issue. The journey took hours, winding through one of India's poorest regions. As he looked out the window, he saw shoeless children and, under a makeshift shelter, a sick, dying old man, completely alone. As he focused on this stranger's suffering, a wave of compassion washed over him, and he completely forgot about his own pain. He explains, "By simply shifting my focus to another person, which is what compassion does, my own pain was much less intense." This is what he calls wise selfishness, as opposed to foolish selfishness. Foolish selfishness is thinking only of yourself, which inevitably leads to isolation and misery. Wise selfishness is recognizing that caring for others, actively helping them, turns out to be the most effective way to discover your own joy. This idea forms the foundation for what the Dalai Lama calls mental immunity. Just like we build physical immunity to protect ourselves from viruses and bacteria, we can build mental immunity to shield ourselves from destructive emotions. This isn't about suppressing feelings or pretending they don't exist. It's about understanding how your mind actually works. Some thoughts and emotions are toxic, disturbing your peace and causing unnecessary pain. Others are healing, bringing lightness and joy. Mental immunity is the practice of learning to avoid the destructive emotions and actively cultivate the positive ones. It takes time and repetition, like building muscle at the gym. When your mental health is strong, small problems cause some momentary distress, but you bounce back quickly. When it's weak, even tiny disturbances can send you spiraling into fear, worry, and anger. This brings us face to face with the great obstacles to joy, the inner demons we all wrestle with. First up is fear, stress, and anxiety. The Archbishop reminds us that fear itself isn't the enemy. It's a natural survival mechanism, the thing that stops you from cheerfully approaching a hungry lion. The problem arises when fear becomes wildly exaggerated, when it's triggered by things that pose no real threat. The Dalai Lama adds that so much of our stress comes from unrealistic expectations and overblown ambitions. We desperately want something, And when we don't get it, frustration floods in. We're not being realistic about our own abilities or about how the world actually works. The key is learning to see things as they are, not as we wish they were. The second obstacle is frustration and anger. The Dalai Lama points out that fear and anger are intimately connected, two sides of our fight-or-flight response. He tells this hilarious story about his old car mechanic back in Tibet. The guy was working under a car and accidentally banged his head hard on the fender. He got so furious that he stood up and started deliberately banging his head against the car again and again. This, the Dalai Lama says with a chuckle, is anger in a nutshell. It's completely foolish. It just inflicts more pain on ourselves. Instead of reacting with anger, he encourages us to engage our analytical minds. Why did this happen? What will my anger actually accomplish? You quickly realize it's utterly useless. The Archbishop adds an important nuance. There is a place for righteous anger, which is usually sparked not by harm to ourselves, but by seeing others being hurt. That's a tool of compassion, not a knee-jerk reaction. Next comes sadness and grief. In our culture, we often treat sadness like the enemy of joy. We tell people to cheer up, to look on the bright side, essentially to suppress what they're feeling. But the Archbishop argues this is fundamentally misguided. He tells the story of the first day of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission hearings. A man was testifying about being tortured, but he broke down completely, unable to speak, and began to weep. The Archbishop, sitting as chairman, found tears streaming down his own face. At first, he felt ashamed, thinking he'd made an unprofessional spectacle of himself. But he came to realize that suppressing emotions isn't wise or healthy. Sadness is what connects us at the deepest level. He says we don't really get close to others if our relationship is made up of unending hunky-doriness. It is the hard times that knit us more closely together. Grief, a psychologist friend explains, is simply the measure of our love. Without love, there is no grief. So when you feel that ache, it's actually a beautiful reminder of the love that was there, and in a sense still is. Then there's despair, especially the kind we feel when looking at the state of the world. Endless wars, starvation, terrorism, environmental destruction. The most commonly asked question submitted for this book was, how can I possibly find joy when the world is falling apart? The Archbishop's answer is beautifully direct. Look again. Yes, humans are capable of horrific atrocities, but we also have this fantastic capacity for goodness. He points to organizations like Doctors Without Borders, people who leave comfortable, safe lives to work in the most dangerous, poverty-stricken places on earth. For every act of violence reported, there are countless unreported acts of kindness and courage. The Dalai Lama adds that the news media gives us a fundamentally distorted view of reality. Millions of children are loved and cared for by their parents every single day. Millions of people receive compassionate care in hospitals. But these things are so common they're not considered newsworthy. We need to maintain a more balanced, holistic view. He also shares a powerful meditation practice called Tonglen, or giving and taking. When protests erupted in Tibet in 2008, and Chinese authorities responded with brutal violence, he felt helpless. So in his meditation, he visualized the Chinese officials. He breathed in their fear, their anger, their deep suspicion, and he breathed out his love and forgiveness toward them. It didn't change what was happening on the ground, but it kept his own mind calm and compassionate, preventing him from falling into the pit of despair. Another major obstacle is loneliness. We're living in the most technologically connected era in human history, yet loneliness has reached epidemic levels. The Dalai Lama traces this back to our materialistic culture, which treats people like machines or consumers, and to our obsession with secondary differences: my nation, my religion, my political party, my race. When we focus on these divisions, we build walls between ourselves and others. But when we relate to people on what he calls the first level, the human level, there are no barriers at all. He says, no need for introduction. Same human face. You can smile and say hello. This connects to the African concept of Ubuntu, which the Archbishop explains as, a person is a person through other persons. We aren't created for rugged independence. We're wired for interdependence. We belong in this delicate, beautiful network of human connection. We can only be fully human together. Finally, there's envy. You know that feeling when your neighbor drives past in their brand new luxury car for the third time this week? Envy poisons our joy like nothing else. The antidote, the Dalai Lama explains, is a practice called mudita, or sympathetic joy. It's the ability to genuinely rejoice in someone else's good fortune. When we see another person succeed, instead of feeling diminished or resentful, we can think, good for them. Just like me, they want to be happy. I'm glad they're experiencing some. Mudita recognizes that life isn't a zero-sum game. Joy is limitless. One person's happiness doesn't subtract from your potential for happiness. The Archbishop offers a simpler remedy. Count your blessings. When you're genuinely thankful for what you have, you naturally become less obsessed with what you don't have. Overcoming these obstacles isn't something you accomplish in a weekend workshop. It's the work of a lifetime. But the Dalai Lama and Archbishop provide us with a practical toolkit, a set of principles they call the 8 pillars of joy. 4 are qualities of the mind and 4 are qualities of the heart. The first pillar of the mind is perspective. We've already seen how transformative this can be. It's the ability to step back and view a situation from multiple angles, instead of getting trapped in your initial, usually self-centered interpretation. It's recognizing that your limited view isn't the whole truth. It's finding the opportunity hidden in the tragedy, the blessing wrapped in the curse. It's shifting from me to we. As the Archbishop demonstrates, when you're stuck in traffic and frustration is building, you can look at the other drivers and silently bless them, imagining the invisible struggles each person is carrying in their own life. In that moment, your own frustration often just dissolves. The second pillar is humility. These 2 men, who are treated with a level of reverence and deference that few people on earth will ever experience, are profoundly humble. They see themselves as just one person among 7 billion human beings. The Dalai Lama tells this hilarious story about an interfaith meeting where another spiritual leader demanded his chair be placed on bricks so he'd be sitting physically higher than everyone else. The Dalai Lama just sat there thinking, I wish one of those bricks would slip just so he'd have to act like a regular human being. Humility, they teach, isn't about thinking less of yourself or having low self-esteem. It's about thinking of yourself less often. It's recognizing that whatever gifts you have come from something greater than your ego, and that we're all deeply interconnected and dependent on one another. The third pillar is humor. Their week of dialogues was absolutely filled with constant laughter. They tease each other mercilessly, poke fun at themselves, and use humor as a powerful tool to diffuse tension and speak uncomfortable truths. The Archbishop recalls how during the darkest days of apartheid, humor became a weapon of resistance. At funerals for people killed by police, where the atmosphere was explosive with rage and grief, he would tell self-deprecating jokes to help people release their anger in a positive way, rather than letting it turn violent. Laughter reminds us of our shared humanity and our shared ridiculousness. It allows us not to take ourselves so seriously, which is often exactly what we need most. The fourth pillar of the mind is acceptance. This isn't resignation or passive defeat. It's the ability to accept reality exactly as it is, not as you wish it were. And paradoxically, this is the only place from which genuine change can begin. You can't change apartheid by pretending it doesn't exist. You have to accept its reality first, see it clearly, before you can dismantle it. The Dalai Lama's practice of accepting a canceled flight and using the unexpected free time as an opportunity to meditate is a small but perfect example of this profound skill. Acceptance is the sword that cuts through our exhausting resistance to what is, allowing us to relax, see clearly, and respond appropriately to life on its own terms. These four qualities of the mind prepare the ground for the four qualities of the heart, which are really the engine of a joyful life. The fifth pillar, and the first of the heart, is forgiveness. The Archbishop, who chaired South Africa's Truth and Reconciliation Commission, has witnessed some of the most extraordinary acts of forgiveness imaginable. He shares the story of mothers whose sons were brutally murdered by a traitor from their own movement. At the hearing, one grief-stricken mother threw her shoe at the murderer in rage. But later, during a break, the mothers huddled together. Their spokesperson approached the man, embraced him, and said, "My child, we forgive you." Forgiveness, they emphasize, is not about forgetting what happened. It's not about excusing evil behavior or pretending it didn't hurt. It's about freeing yourself from the past. The Archbishop explains it perfectly. Without forgiveness, we remain tethered to the person who harmed us. That person will become our jailer. When we forgive, we take back control of our own fate. Forgiveness isn't a sign of weakness, it's a sign of tremendous strength. The sixth pillar is gratitude. Every morning, the Dalai Lama says, we should wake up thinking, I am fortunate to be alive. I have a precious human life. I am not going to waste it. Gratitude shifts our entire perspective from what we lack to what we already have. It transforms simple enjoyment into something noble and meaningful. It's not just eating a meal, but being thankful for the farmers who grew the food, the grocers who stocked it, the people who cooked it, and the earth that made it all possible. A researcher on gratitude named Brother David Steindl-Rast puts it beautifully. It is not happiness that makes us grateful. It is gratefulness that makes us happy. Gratitude allows us to truly savor each moment before it vanishes into memory. The seventh pillar is compassion. This is absolutely the cornerstone of everything they teach. A compassionate concern for others' well-being is the source of happiness. The Dalai Lama states simply, compassion isn't just feeling empathy, which is feeling with someone. Compassion is the motivation to actively relieve another person's suffering. If you see someone being crushed under a rock, empathy is getting under the rock with them and suffering alongside them. Compassion is actually trying to remove the rock. We're hardwired for compassion as a species. When we help others, our brains release endorphins, creating what researchers call a helper's high. But many of us are secretly afraid of compassion. We're afraid of being overwhelmed by the ocean of suffering around us. The key is starting with self-compassion, being genuinely kind to ourselves, accepting our own limitations and failures. We cannot truly love others if we don't first learn to love ourselves. And finally, the eighth pillar is generosity. Generosity is compassion in action, compassion with legs. The Archbishop says that when we give something away, it feels like we're subtracting from ourselves, losing something. But in some mysterious, almost magical way, we're actually making space for more to flow into our lives. He uses the metaphor of the Dead Sea. It receives fresh water constantly from rivers and streams, but it has no outlet. It only takes and never gives. And so the water becomes stagnant and toxic, unable to support life. The same thing happens to us when we only receive and never give. We shrivel and stagnate. Generosity isn't just about money either. We can give our time, our wisdom, our attention, our presence, our kindness, our listening ear. When we develop a truly generous spirit, we naturally radiate happiness. We become, as the Archbishop so beautifully phrases it, an oasis of peace, a pool of serenity that can ripple out to all those around us. The week of profound conversations culminates in a birthday celebration for the Dalai Lama at the Tibetan Children's Village, a boarding school for refugee children who have fled from Tibet. It's an intensely emotional event. Young children, some as young as 5 or 6, share their harrowing stories of escaping over the treacherous mountains, leaving their parents behind, perhaps forever. They weep as they speak, their small voices breaking, and the entire room weeps with them. But then the Archbishop rises to speak. With the thundering force of a prophet, he looks directly at these heartbroken children and tells them, "It might not seem possible right now that you will one day return to a free Tibet, but we in South Africa lived under brutal oppression for generations, and it seemed like the chains would never, ever be broken. But it happened. Freedom came. One day you too, all of you, will see your beloved Tibet. You will be free. One day, you will be dancing and singing in the streets of Tibet, your home country." The children erupt in cheers, hope flooding back into their faces. The celebration continues with cake and singing. The children start belting out, "We are the world." The Archbishop begins doing his signature joyful boogie, bouncing and swaying. He coaxes his friend to join him, and for the first time in his entire life, gently bending his monastic vows, the Dalai Lama dances. He sways back and forth, this huge radiant smile spreading across his face as these two old friends hold hands and move to the music together, a living, breathing embodiment of the joy they've spent a week trying to describe. The final morning brings a brief, tender goodbye. Everyone in the room knows this may very well be the last time these two will ever see each other in this life. As the Archbishop settles into his car, the Dalai Lama stands by the open window, gently rubbing his dear friend's hand. There's unmistakable sadness in his eyes, but also this deep, unshakable love. He brings his palms together and bows his head in a final gesture of respect and reverence. As the car slowly pulls away, he waves brightly, like a child, saying goodbye. The message couldn't be clearer. Joy and sorrow aren't opposites locked in eternal combat. They're woven together, two threads in the same precious fabric of a life fully lived. To turn toward one is inevitably to encounter the other. The true secret to joy, the one they demonstrated with every laugh, every tear, and every tender embrace throughout that remarkable week, is this: the more we turn away from our own self-absorption to wipe the tears from someone else's eyes, the more we're able to bear, to heal, and to transcend our own suffering. As we step back from the Book of Joy, what stays with you isn't some complex philosophical system or religious doctrine. It's the radiant, infectious humanity of these two remarkable men. Their laughter reaches across the pages and pulls you in. Their wisdom lands without feeling preachy. And their friendship itself becomes a powerful teacher. The most powerful idea in this entire book, at least for me, is the complete reframing of what we're actually pursuing in life. We're so often taught to chase happiness as if it's a destination. We pursue achievements, accumulate possessions, collect experiences, believing that when we finally get enough of them, then we'll be happy. This book gently, but firmly flips that logic completely upside down. Joy isn't the destination you reach after collecting enough good things. It's the unexpected reward that shows up when you stop obsessing over your own happiness and start genuinely caring about the well-being of others. This isn't just some nice spiritual idea for saints to contemplate. It's a practical, actionable strategy for building a better life right now. The 8 pillars of joy aren't abstract virtues reserved for monks and monasteries. They're skills, real skills that anyone can develop. Perspective, humility, humor, acceptance, forgiveness, gratitude, compassion, and generosity. Think of these as muscles of the mind and heart. The more you deliberately exercise them, the stronger they become, and the more naturally they show up in your daily life. So how can you actually start building these muscles today? It can feel overwhelming when you look at all 8 pillars at once, but the beauty of their message is its elegant simplicity. You don't have to master everything at once. First, try practicing a wider perspective. The next time you feel that familiar surge of frustration building, maybe someone cuts you off in traffic, or a colleague says something that stings, or your partner forgets something important, just pause. Pause for literally 1 second. Instead of immediately reacting, ask yourself this simple question. What might be their story right now? What pain or pressure might they be carrying that caused them to act this way? This tiny shift in perspective can transform burning anger into a flicker of understanding, maybe even compassion. Second, start cultivating gratitude as a daily practice. Tonight, before you drift off to sleep, take just 60 seconds to think of 3 specific things you're genuinely grateful for from your day. It could be something as simple as the warmth of the sun on your face, a kind word from a stranger in line at the coffee shop, or the taste of your favorite food. Writing them down in a journal is even more powerful because it engages your brain differently. This simple act, done consistently, actually trains your brain to actively look for the good, to notice the abundance that's already present in your life, instead of fixating on what's missing. And third, practice small acts of generosity. This doesn't require grand gestures or writing big checks. It can be as simple as offering a genuine smile to the exhausted cashier at the grocery store, giving your full, undivided attention when a friend needs to talk instead of half listening while scrolling your phone, or doing a small favor for a family member without being asked and without expecting anything in return. The goal is to shift your default focus, even for just a moment, from "what can I get" to "what can I give?" In a world that often feels fractured by division, clouded by despair, and dominated by bad news, the message of the Dalai Lama and Archbishop Tutu arrives like a beacon of genuine hope. They remind us that our default state as human beings is not selfishness but compassion. We're not fundamentally wired for conflict, but for connection. And the greatest joy we'll ever experience in this life won't come from what we manage to acquire and hoard for ourselves, but from what we freely give to each other. That was a summary of the Book of Joy by the Dalai Lama and Archbishop Desmond Tutu. We've explored the core of their wisdom together today, but I need to be completely honest with you about something. A summary, no matter how thorough, is like looking at a photograph of a magnificent feast. You can see the colors, appreciate the arrangement, get a sense of what's there, but you can't actually taste the food. You can't smell the aromas or experience the subtle flavors. The real nourishment, the stuff that actually changes you, comes from sitting down with the book yourself and taking it in at your own pace. It's in those quiet moments when one of their stories, or just a simple turn of phrase, lands in a way you didn't expect and shifts something inside you. This summary is meant to give you a taste of the meal, to help you decide if it's one you want to experience fully for yourself. If anything we've talked about today has sparked something within you, If you felt even a flicker of recognition or curiosity, I genuinely encourage you to grab a copy and spend time with it. Reading it isn't just about learning some concepts. It's an experience that can genuinely transform the way you see yourself and the world around you. There's a link to the book in the description below. Also, if you found this journey valuable and want more like it, please take a moment to hit that like button and subscribe to Billionaire's Bookshelf. That way, you won't miss our next deep dive into another potentially life-changing book. Let's continue this journey of growth and discovery together.